Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Elongate, the cryptocurrency for charity. My name is Alex, and you've tuned in to our charity party. And today we're joined by a very special guest from the Malala Fund, Suzanne Ehlers. Suzanne, how are you? Thanks for joining me.
I'm great, thank you. I'm not the most special guest from Malala Fund you can have, but short of Malala herself, who's off busy celebrating her birthday today, really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Amazing. And if you don't mind, I just want to give you a brief introduction. Suzanne leads Malala's Fund's global staff of experts and advocates who are breaking down barriers that prevent 130 million girls around the world from going to school. Suzanne works closely with co-founders Malala and Ziauddin Yousafzai. Am I saying that right?
Malala and Ziauddin Yousafzai.
Thank you so much. Malala and Ziauddin Yousafzai.
Yousafzai, you got it.
Yousafzai, perfect. And a highly regarded board of directors and professional team who advance the progress towards girls' education around the world. Prior to her appointment at Malala Fund, Suzanne served as the president and CEO of PAI, a global advocacy leader in the effort to protect and promote the reproductive rights of women and girls. Suzanne led the organization for 10 years and was at PAI for 16 years total. Before joining them, she worked in grant making at the Wallace Global Fund and served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Central African Republic. Additionally, she sits on the board of IBIS Reproductive Health and LAM, a public charter school in Washington, D.C. Suzanne holds a bachelor's degree in government from Cornell University. Suzanne, you have quite the resume. I'm so excited for you to be here with me today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. I'm actually calling in, as you know, Alex, from San Antonio, Texas, my childhood home and bedroom. I'm visiting my parents sort of post-COVID. And yeah, the career trajectory you just laid out has been one that I've been honored to be on. I love the work that I do, always in service to greater goals and values around social justice, around women and girls, around basic human rights for all. So it's really lovely to hear you kind of talk about, kind of where I came from and how I ended up at Malala Fund, which is a true delight.
Yeah, it is quite the journey. So for anyone who doesn't know, kind of like the baseline details of what you do at Malala Fund, what Malala Fund is, share with me a little bit more about the mission and cause.
Well, let me start by, because you just gave me an introduction. So I'll start with, just the clarification on my own introduction. I'm in service to greatness, in service to total excellence, from Malala and Ziauddin and the board of directors to an incredible global team, to education champions that we work with in many different countries, girl activists. I mean, it's a really sort of an easy job to have, is to sort of lift up and amplify the great work that they do every day. The organization itself, as you said, we're working to make sure that we have a world where every girl can learn and lead. It seems absolutely absurd that 130 million girls are not in school, would like to be learning, and are not in school. And that was pre-COVID. And we'll talk a little bit later today about how we're worried that that number has increased and may not go down, even as we begin to recover from the pandemic. And there's a lot of reasons why girls are not in school. So just to sort of like the what that we do is sort of trying to break down those barriers. So some of those barriers are what we called social norms. Well, girls shouldn't be in school, or gender stereotypes. Girls can't learn STEM, or girls shouldn't be involved in stuff like artificial intelligence, to conflict and natural disasters. Our country is in such a period of instability. We can't afford to risk the safety and security of our girls, or we're dealing with the effects of climate change and we need our girls to work rather than go to school. It's lack of education funding. Governments that have a ton of priorities and a ton of competing priorities say, well, maybe we don't need to invest as much in education, even though I think we on this call would agree that it's real cornerstone. And then, of course, some issues that really specifically affect girls, like child marriage. Girls getting married way too young in such a way that it pulls them out of school and they never even start, much less finish, secondary education. Child labor as well. I mean, disproportionately impacts girls around the world. So the what that we do is sort of trying to break down those barriers and many others that keep girls from pursuing 12 years of free and safe and super high quality education. And then the other part of the mission that's really important is how we do it. And we do it by investing in local leaders. We do it by moving resources to those who were on the front lines of working to secure girls' education access and to make sure that they have the tools at their disposal to make policy change, to convince families and parents and communities that girls should go to school, that technologies have been figured out in a way that serve the needs of girls. So the what is getting them in school, and the how is investing in local leaders and amplifying the voices of girls. We do that through a digital platform that we can talk about later called Assembly, that lifts up incredible stories from girls around the world. But Alex, I think we have a video that we can queue up that's a really short but beautiful one that just sort of says what I said much more succinctly and beautifully with Malala's voice.
Absolutely. We'll roll the clip.
Thanks.
When you give to Malala Fund, your donation reaches people around the world. Your gift supports advocates like Munira, who's working to change laws in Nigeria so that all girls can go to school for 12 years. Girls Like Peace, a 15-year-old activist who helps other girls understand their rights to education. Educators like Arman, who recruits and trains female teachers in Afghanistan. Activists like Rihanna are convincing parents to send their daughters to school in India. Thanks to Rihanna's work and your support, Sonam is in school and learning today. These girls want nothing more than an education and an equal chance to pursue their dreams. Please give today and join me in creating a world where every girl can choose her own future.
Amazing. And it's such a noble
Beautiful.
cause.
Thanks for showing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to learn a little bit more about Malala herself, if you can share a bit. Today is her birthday, and we're celebrating her birthday here on stream. So happy birthday to Malala. How did Malala Fund get founded? Where did what's her journey in taking on this movement?
I mean, I was thinking what I was doing when I was 11, which might have actually been in this childhood bedroom here in San Antonio, and it was nowhere near as noble and brave as what Malala was doing when she was 11. And with the support of and really a deep, loving partnership with her father, Ziauddin, she was anonymously blogging for the BBC, telling the story of girls' education in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. And not just fighting for her right to education, because she had a family and a father in particular who was supportive, so she was going to get educated kind of no matter, but really making the case that all girls everywhere deserve to be educated. And really, I think, had that vision sort of from the get-go at age 11. As the world knows, she was attacked for speaking out. And as often happens, that attack only deepened her resolve and lifted up her own kind of moral authority, really, to talk about the fight for education and the fight for gender equality. In 2013, I think it was, so we're sort of 7-8 years along, 2013, Malala and Ziauddin co-founded Malala Fund, which is an international nonprofit. We have offices, no real headquarters, right? We have a global footprint of a team everywhere from where I'm based in Washington, D.C., to Afghanistan, to Nigeria, Brazil, Ethiopia, doing work all over the world in support of girls' education, a team of 70 plus, supporting, as I mentioned earlier, really amazing champions. So that's a little bit of the origin story. And because people know Malala, let me just say, she chairs our board, she serves as co-founder, and she is deeply and intimately involved in almost every aspect of the organization's work. Calls donors personally on the phone, joins strategic planning sessions, chairs board meetings. I mean, really is a founder who deeply cares about the health of the organization and the work that we're doing. So it's a real joy for me to work alongside her and to learn from her and her advocacy.
That's incredible. Now, what I really want to dig into is what makes Malala Fund different from other organizations that work with girls or education? Because there's a handful.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could take $10 and I could go give it to a school and say I support education. So what is Malala Fund doing that is just a little bit more innovative, a little bit more special?
I love the question around innovation, particularly. I mean, I would say a couple of things. I mean, the one thing that's obvious that makes us really unique is Malala. Malala and Ziauddin both. And I say that because you hear their name associated with us and you think, well, it must be a walk in the park. Everything's easy because you've got Malala at the helm and any head of state will pick up the phone from Malala at any time. I think the challenge for Malala Fund is to use the access and the visibility that she gives us and use it uniquely to build the sector and to build the field and to really support all of those who were working not just on girls' education, but on adolescent girls and women and girls worldwide. So that's the first thing, that she makes us unique, but it actually is a huge responsibility for us to kind of lift others as we get access to the room. The door's always open, the phone call's always picked up. What do you do with that power and access? I think the second thing that makes us unique, and this may be lip service for some, it's not for us. I mean, we really do center the voices and experiences of girls. And if you've ever looked at our digital platform newsletter assembly, I mean, those are stories by girls, for girls, edited by girls, shared by girls. Like, that is the issues that are most meaningful to them, from racial justice to STEM to robotics to climate change. We are lifting up their stories and having them influence the way we think about the change and impact we're trying to have in the world. And I think that makes us unique. I think we sort of say we do it, and then we really do it, even if it means that we're constantly having to kind of iterate and reinvent how we do our work, because the experience of girls is changing all the time. Their lived experience is constantly evolving. So if we're going to stay relevant to them and their needs, we have to constantly be evolving with them. And then I guess the last piece that makes us, I think, super unique, I said it earlier, is that we're really locally led. So I'm not figuring out a solution for a colleague, Naila, in Lebanon as it relates to education for Lebanese and Syrian refugee girls. We're supporting Naila and her team to come up with those solutions. We're working with Kiki James in Nigeria to figure out if radio programs in the moment of COVID are really the best way to reach the girls who are most remote and don't have access to school. We say locally led, we say we respect local expertise, we're funding local advocates because they know best what their communities need, and we really do it. And really always challenging our organization to kind of decentralize decision-making and authority and strategy, so that we are being sort of led from kind of the local back up in terms of how we make our decisions and chart our course.
I love that focus on decentralization and really making sure that the areas that need your focus most really define your strategy. And obviously education is of critical importance. Obviously, justice and equality is of critical importance. But what makes education for women and girls, and you talked about it a little bit just now, but what makes it such a vital topic today in 2021? What are kind of the pain points and the injustices around this area that our audience might not even know exist?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot to sort of shed some light on. But I'll start by saying this. Girls' education, and you'll hear this if you're in it's a multiplier issue. It's a cornerstone issue. You invest in girls' education and you do well by health and the economy and everything, all of which is true. And we start and we end with the girl. I mean, at the end of the day, we're working on girls' education because girls everywhere deserve to be educated. So that, I just want to say full stop, that's kind of the mission. And if it didn't have any other side benefits, doing it in order to advance the learning and the leading and the human rights of girls, that would be enough for us. Lucky for us, not only is it all of that, but then it's all of these other things. It's all of the contribution that girls' education and educated girls make to any number of kind of global issues of import. So it's climate change. It's the contribution it makes to the global economy. I mean, we leave $30 trillion in lifetime earnings on the table because we don't educate girls and because we haven't actually built robust education systems to meet their needs. So if you're thinking about the future and sort of the wealth of the world to come, and you're leaving half your population on the bench because you're not securing them their 12 years of free and safe, high quality education, just think about what your global workforce is handicapped. And I think we think a lot about how to really make those investments in ways that have multiplier effects. Public health, I think, is sort of another sort of piece of it. I mentioned the climate, sort of piece, and sort of the natural resources and sort of environmental sustainability. There's so many linkages that tie into kind of the provision of girls' education that we are sort of trying to walk through any door available to us so that everybody sees the role they can play in kind of making these foundational investments and helping create the policy change and awareness that we need.
I love that, and that's incredible insight. So thank you for articulating that so well. So with all of that in mind, painting the picture of what's going on, what are kind of the maybe top one or two things Malala Fund is working on right now?
I mean, I think the first thing is COVID. And I know it's been on everybody's mind and on everyone's heart for the past practically almost 18 months. I'm calling in today from the United States, and we've had some really great success with vaccination. We know there are many parts of the world that have not had the same access to vaccination. We're having the Delta surge in many places. Like, COVID's not over, and we have been tracking it so closely this last year plus and the impact that it will have on girls' education. So it's not diminishing in terms of our focus and our effort, because the local experts that we work with say we still have to stay trained on that. We still have to think about the impact of COVID. So the figure, Alex, that you quoted earlier and that I then repeated, 130 million girls out of school, we're worried that COVID may put another 20 million, if not more, out of school, never to return. So those are numbers that don't need to grow and unfortunately are growing under COVID. I think that we are trying to figure out where economies and school systems are rebuilding from COVID. What will it mean to reintegrate girls in that system? You can't just sort of open the school doors and say, hey, we're back in action, back in service, everybody in, when girls in the meantime have begun to raise money for their families, when girls are taking on caretaking responsibilities, when girls are really trying to keep families economically afloat, when the public health question is still really delicate for so many communities. People don't want to send their children, much less their girls, back into some of those places. So the rebuild question is really top on our mind, and COVID will be a central feature of our strategy for, quite frankly, for as long as it needs to be to meet the needs of women and girls. And then I think the only other thing I would highlight when you say kind of what are you working on right now, this is an offshoot of COVID, but we were doing it before. It's everything around remote learning and the kind of digital technology piece. So we were doing that kind of scattershot. You saw places doing remote learning and online curriculum. As we all know, COVID totally accelerated it. I have a 14-year-old and 11-year-old who were from one day to the next, being remote schooled downstairs at my kitchen table. I think what we didn't anticipate is how gendered the digital divide is, that if there is a limited number of devices in a home, guess what? The girls get them last. If you have unstable internet and electricity, guess what? It's the girl who doesn't get the lesson when her brothers do. Like, there are really gendered elements to where girls lose out on technology solutions. So I think that's another piece that we're having to think about in partnership with local experts and advocates. But what does it mean to really answer that question, not only in a moment of COVID, but when we can't put the genie back in the bottle as it relates to kind of remote learning and digital technologies? What can we do to better meet, again, the needs of gender equality and girls' education? And I think, again, we have a short video, if you don't mind queuing it up, that's really specific, gives a couple of specific examples about how we've worked on COVID.
Absolutely. I'll roll it.
Thanks, Alex.
Hi, I am Malala Yousafzai and I'm a girls' education activist. I know that for some of you, schools might not be open yet, while for some of you, they have reopened, but you are uncertain about going back to schools. But I want you to remember that nothing is more important for you than education, especially if you are a girl. Parents, teachers, and leaders, we know that 12 years of education for girls strengthens our families, communities, and countries. Please do everything you can to make sure all girls can re-enroll in school. Students, schools must be safe for you and your teachers. Remember to wear a mask, practice social distancing, and wash your hands to protect yourself and everyone around you. Whether your school is open or not, I hope you will do whatever you can to keep learning. Even though it may have been many months since you have been to school, don't lose hope and don't give up on your education. I know you have dreams and ambitions, and I believe you can make this world a better place. It all begins with education, so go back to your school as soon as it's safe.
Nice.
It really does all begin with education. And on that note of dreams and ambitions, what are some projects or dreams that your organization, Malala Fund, has that you still need funding for?
It's like the dream question for any CEO anywhere. I mean, I guess I would sort of make clear that we're called Malala Fund and we're not endowed, right? We raise funds to redistribute them. And so whatever resources we have at our disposal, we're trying to move the highest possible percentage of those out the door into the hands of local experts and advocates. And they're like the plethora of good ideas that they have is never ending. It's everything from advocacy to sort of figuring out the climate debate to figuring out girl activists and how to really train them to be the leaders of the next generation. It's sort of like there's just no holds barred on what that network of champions and advocates can do. I'm also really interested, and this is sort of part of what I think, Alex, this conversation is about. Like, how do we get all these different sort of sectors and communities to really understand the centrality of girls' education? Like, I have a dream that we would just continue to be sort of the global leader in bringing together all of these seemingly disparate threads so that people saw girls' education as sort of like the starting block for anything. I mean, you want to build peace, you got to educate your girls. You want to have like a healthy community, you got to educate your girls. You want to grow your economy, you got to educate your girls. Like, no matter what door you want to walk through for prosperity and for peace and for future building, it's girls' education. And I think as an organization, we can only get better at telling that story of like how integrated our solution can be to whatever, you know, sort of most motivates you and kind of animates you in your life. Yeah, so that's sort of the two that I would give, you know, just sort of like have such respect for the team and so much of the thinking that they're doing around, you know, the COVID response and how like just sort of fast on the mark we were. I mean, we gave additional resources to all of our partners like almost immediately and said, have flexibility with the funding you have from us and figure out what your immediate response to COVID has to be. As COVID starts to let up in places, we're saying, what are the questions you're being what are you struggling with? What are the questions that are not being asked about girls' return to school? Always trying to provide, you know, of course, strategic thought partnership, but also real financial resources for these groups to do the work that they need to do in places like Ethiopia, Tanzania, Bangladesh, Pakistan. Really, again, sort of trusting in and investing in those local voices to say, this is what our most pressing problem is. So that's a couple of sort of like dreams of where we would go with more resources.
That's amazing. We're honored to have you here today. You know, here at Elongate, we're trying to sort of shepherd the crypto culture in a way, right? We're not only trying to sort of bring back the spark of altruism and philanthropy, but also we're trying to make crypto not be such a boys club, right? And so we've been really pleasantly surprised in how much of our audience has said, hey, Elongate, when are you going to do something for women and girls? And the number that said, when are you going to do something with the Malala Fund? So it's you guys are an ideal partner. So it's great to be able to contribute. And we're excited to say that we're going to be donating $25,000 today as just the seed fund for the start of a fund we want to build for you guys.
Happy birthday, Malala. I love it.
Happy birthday, Malala. That's right.
I love it. I appreciate the generosity. And I so appreciate that that's what you heard from your community and from your constituency. I mean, I think you can walk through any door as it relates to women and girls and do well. If it's, you know, inheritance rights, if it's, again, sort of economic productivity, if it's education, if it's health, anything, investing in women and girls is, it's just like a multiplier. The ROI is incredible. The impact is incredible. And there's so much untapped innovation out there. So I just really love the innovation, like energy that your community brings to a partner like Malala Fund. We're really honored to be here. So thank you. Awesome news. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Our audience has already been firing off some questions. Would you be able to take some questions from the audience?
Sure. I mean, if I don't know the answer, I'm the first to say, I don't know the answer, and I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, give me a shot.
Awesome. Okay, I'll pop one up here. Here's one. Malala Fund, what is the greatest goal you've achieved so far? And what do you think your number one goal would be by 2030?
Oh, God, what a great question. The greatest goal that we've achieved so far. I mean, I'm going to say, and, you know, I can give a lot of credit to Malala because, you know, she may not do it herself. I feel like she has put the issue of girls' education sort of solidly and forever on the map. That we have sort of lifted it up as an area of it's under-resourced. It's not gotten the attention it deserves. It's not understood enough to be this like cornerstone and kind of foundational investment that you can make to make the rest of the system sort of work. And I think Malala Fund, and I haven't been there there for that long, so I'm not even tooting my own horn. Like, I think the organization can take, some credit, some real credit for helping really lift that story and making it a part of the Sustainable Development Goals and sort of everything at the national level and all in between. So that feels to me like a great goal that we have helped kind of push across the finish line. The work is not done by any stretch. Now, if you say 2030, that's 9 years out.
Right.
God, I mean, in 9 years, what I would love to see is for the organization to be working. I'd love to see us with breadth and depth. I'd like us to be seen in more countries, working with more local advocates, more experts who are on the front lines, where girls are really underserved and trying to sort of access the education that they deserve. And in those places where we can really go deep and we can think about what it means to build the ecosystem of sort of social justice warriors for women and girls, I hope we're part of both, right? I hope we're part of the broadening, and I hope we're part of the deepening in a way that our organization is always spoken of, that we operate with humility, that we operate with generosity, that we're always lifting up and amplifying other voices. If in 2030 people are talking about Malala Fund in ways that say, one of the best games in town, wonderful to partner with, all they do is lift other boats, that will be success for us. And that we continue on our journey of anti-racism and decolonial work. I mean, that's also a huge piece of who we are and kind of shifting the narrative of how you do this sort of stuff. God, if in 2030 we are even further along in that journey than we are today, a lot to be proud of. So that's a great question. I'll have to think about 2030 and 9 years out. So check back in with me.
I love that. Now, this next topic is one you touched on briefly, but it's one I saw a couple comments about. So I just want to pop this one up. I think that a lot of us really kind of got our feet wet in remote learning because of COVID, right? No matter where you are. So what does it mean for you guys to use remote learning as part of your strategy? Are there technical, economic, cultural roadblocks?
Yes, there is. I mean, I think that we have, we had never had an institutional focus on remote learning and kind of digital, but we had a focus on it through, again, the work of education champions. So Haroon working at Arinda Network in Pakistan with his app called Talimabad, like that, we were investing in that. And then we saw COVID like really amplify the need for it. And we're able to sort of like invest more and get it to take up the national curriculum and reach millions of school children, right? So I think we were gratified to see that some of that seed investment we made could really just sort of multiply overnight. And so I think the challenge for Malala Fund on remote learning is, number one, to continue to follow the lead of local experts and advocates who know what can work and what their community can sort of withstand and what technologies are doable and sustainable. Radios in northern Nigeria, downloadable little smart devices in Lebanon. Like, we have to trust that our local experts and advocates know what the fit is for their place. And then I think we have to get more nimble about investing in really innovative ideas that are sort of pushing the margins of what we're thinking about when it comes to remote learning and digital. And again, that gendered notion of the digital divide. I think we just have to get more courageous as the sort of funders, as the intermediaries who are pushing resources out to really try a bunch of stuff, because that's not what I see happening at other organizations. Other organizations that are bigger, they can take this to scale in a way that Malala Fund can't. So we need to be the catalyst. We need to be the ones who are thinking about, where's the biggest bang for the buck? What new idea can we invest in? And if you invest in 10 and 3 really like knock it out of the park, I mean, you all know as smart investors that that's really good rate of return for, for sort of technologies that might change and save the world. So that's my answer to remote learning. I mean, there's a lot more to do there. I just have to always think about what Malala Fund is best positioned to do and what's the greatest value add that we can bring at the size and scale of our operations.
Amazing answer. We have a couple people talking about isolated communities. We have this one person who said, educating isolated communities is of the utmost importance. How do you tackle this when there are cultural barriers?
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's the $1 million question. That's one way. Let me actually lift up one of our co-founders who I've talked about, but not as much. That's Ziadine, world's most famous feminist father, who can speak endlessly and eloquently about what it means to invest in girls and why it's worth the risk, right? Why it's worth bucking the trend and saying, no, these girls, our daughters, our nieces deserve to be invested in and educated like anyone else. So I do think that there's ways that we can continue to deploy his voice in certain audiences where, it's truth, right? He is the father speaking the truth of innovating and investing in the daughter and the girl. I do think also that a number of our education champions have come to us with sort of approaches to this. One of them you saw in the video, retraining female teachers. So it sounds like this sort of modest little thing. And there were parents who were not willing to send their girls to school unless they could be educated by female teachers. Well, if you haven't had females going to school and getting trained to be teachers, then of course you have a teacher workforce that isn't meeting those needs. Right. So that's sort of an example of a long-term investment that's really coming. It's a straight response to a social norm that I want my girl educated by a female teacher. The build takes a little bit of time, but once you've got a well-educated and trained teacher workforce that's female, then think about your exponential potential to bring in a whole new generation of educated girls. So there's a couple of examples, where we're really trying to get at that sort of like tipping point of where change needs to happen from a social norms perspective. But it's a great question, and one that, we'll be working on and improving and evolving for the rest of our existence.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I think that shows a lot of vision, definitely. So a couple of people asked about more, how does education fit into a more holistic vision of health and wellness for these young girls? So, education is hard if you're not getting the right nutrition, right? And so like there's all kinds of things like that. How do you tackle the more holistic needs?
I guess I have a two-pronged answer to that. One is making sure that when we say 12 years of free, safe, and high quality, a part of what we mean by high quality is education that really is sort of encompassing sort of the girl, the whole girl. So teaching her comprehensive sexuality education, teaching her what it means to be a green learner in the 21st century with sort of climate change. So my first answer is, the education and the curriculum, the high quality nature of what we're trying to deliver to each girl everywhere is sort of part of the solution, right? I think the second part of the solution is what I said, or maybe I didn't say it, like this sort of idea of collaboration that, nonprofits do see this as sort of a zero-sum game that like, I've got to be on top and my solution has to win. I personally think that there's enough to go around, and I operate always from a posture of generosity. So the more that I can partner with really smart folks in the nutrition sector and really smart climate activists and really smart, sort of health activists, so that we are sort of building integrated solutions to, sort of to the situation of a girl anywhere in the world, like that's better ROI for you as a donor and supporter. It's definitely more fun for me to be across sectors and most importantly, great question about just how how we sort of think about integrating holistically across issues, both for the girl child and then as a sector, as professionals.
I love that. And it makes so much sense to say, almost saying, if I can, take the liberty of putting it in other words, that if you want to build a world of abundance instead of scarcity, you have to operate that way. So I think that
I do. I love, yeah, no, I mean, for those who follow the nonprofit sector, there's this criticism that a lot of leaders operate with this sort of scarcity mindset, that there's sort of never enough. And I think you're right. I think it's about abundance. And I also think there's this sort of a deficits frame. It's sort of related but different, right? That comes in, that we're talking about like all that the girl doesn't have and all that her community doesn't provide her. Like, what about flipping the script? Like, what's the asset frame? The asset frame is that girls are incredible and that we're leaving a ton of potential on the table. Like, let's get girls educated. Let's get them in leadership positions. Let's have them building peace throughout the world. Like, our frame is one of assets and abundance. I think you said it beautifully. I love it.
At a high level, this is something a couple people have asked. At a really high level, what kind of impact could we expect this 25,000 to have?
At a high level, well, I mean, I think that what we're always looking to do, especially with sort of an investment from a partner like you, an innovative partner who's really looking for impact, the best place we can put those resources is straight back into the Education Champion Network, right? It's back into the hands of those who are on the front lines, making change day in and day out. In the midst of COVID, in the midst of natural disaster, in the midst of conflict in places like Afghanistan, like that is, I mean, at a high level, that 25,000 is going to be making change in local communities at exactly the sort of like right pace and right size that it needs to.
Amazing. So, I mean, we're just so honored to have you here. I would love for you to share with our audience how they can get involved with Malala Fund after this stream is over. Where can they go to learn more, find out about your projects, and give directly?
Gosh, so many options. Well, first of all, check out the website because it's beautiful. I'm really so proud of our team that is just constantly designing and innovating ways to like have a site that really malalafund.org. You can go to malala.org too, but both will take you. A whole page of champions of the countries in which we work, all of our latest reports on COVID, on climate. The website's just a great primer, and it's one that we invest a lot in. So I send you there proudly because I know you will find kind of what you need and what you want. You can follow us on social media. I don't know if we're on as many platforms as Elongate. You guys are crazy with all these, but we're on a lot of them, and that's at Malala Fund. We just launched Assembly on Instagram. We've got a busy Twitter feed. Malala, of course, has her own social media feed. So follow us there and sort of like lift up. We, of course, welcome financial support, but we also, like more than anything, like welcome you as partners in lifting up the stories of women and girls, right? Like putting that story front and center when you have the opportunity to, inviting a group like Malala Fund to be a partner in sort of the crypto charity space, really advocating for these issues that should be solved and that are not, and that are only made more complicated by this moment of COVID. I mean, it's really just sort of training your eyes and ears on sort of the untold story of gender inequality and figuring out like what your own personal contribution to that can be. We're planning for the future. We're all trying to build sort of the better world, and girls and women don't have to be all of it, but they've got to be a major part of it. And so I just think even sort of the lifting up of any voice ever makes a difference.
Amazing. And for people who cannot give directly at this time, what's the best way for them if they want to make a difference in their communities?
I mean, you know what? I'm a big fan of volunteering. If you've got the time and if you really want to see sort of problems at sort of like the front level, you know, volunteering on a local school board, volunteering at a soup kitchen, volunteering as it relates to sort of the provision of public health, especially in the time of COVID. I mean, I do it myself. I just cycled off of a local school board, and I have never had more firsthand exposure to sort of what equity in the classroom means, where we're, you know, falling short for kids. What does it mean to have this digital divide? So I'm really a fan of volunteering. I'm a fan of lifting up other people's stories. I'm a fan of thinking about your social media thread and not letting that algorithm sort of feed what you look at, but actually being intentional about who you follow and the kind of groups that you get behind and lift. I think it's just really that you do. I think those are two really kind of like no cost opportunities for you to become a great partner to the work that Malala Fund does.
Suzanne, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. I love the vision. I love everything Malala Fund is doing. Her story is incredible. Once again, happy birthday to Malala.
Happy birthday, Malala.
So we're excited to give what little gift we can. And we're so happy to be able to contribute to your cause and have you now in the Elongate family. So any final thoughts before you sign off for the day?
There. I love abundance and assets. And I would just say, whenever you have the chance, flip the script, right? Like figure out how we can sort of lift up others. Really proud to be a part of this, really learning a lot about the crypto and charity connection, and just applaud your community and applaud what Elongate is doing. It's been a ton of fun, and 25,000 is a huge and generous investment for a first-time partner, and just honored. And we're going to do everything we can to make it have the most impact that it can.
Well, amazing. Thank you again so much for your generosity of your time. This is going to be it for today's charity party. It's been an amazing time speaking with Suzanne, the CEO of Malala Fund, and learning so much about their story. And we really hope to be able to support them again really soon. So stay tuned for the next one, and we'll see you guys on all of our social platforms. Bye.
Thank you.